Are we recording? We're rolling. How you doing today, Allison?
I'm great. How are you?
I'm doing good.
Good.
Thanks for doing this.
Yeah, for sure. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. I've met you a couple years ago at a show I think in Old Town.
Okay.
I bought your book, Flash in the Dark.
I remember meeting you. I couldn't remember where. You've done so many of those at this point. I was like, okay, I know it was somewhere in Lansing, but.
Is that something you do quite often? You do like festivals or shows?
I try to, yeah. I'm trying to find a good place and a good fit for my books. Trying Comic-Cons out, deciding if they're the right fit. What I write is pretty unique, so it's hard to decide where it fits best. It's not really a comic, but Comic-Cons are more going toward like pop culture now, but like a lot of the festivals and stuff are like craft and art festivals, so it's not really like something visual. So just trying it out. And
so have you had better luck with selling your books at like a Comic-Con?
Comic-Cons not been great. I've only done a few at this point. And the one I did was right kind of after COVID, or I guess it's not even after COVID yet, but back when things were just getting going again. And that wasn't super successful. It was fun.
Yeah.
I love going to Comic-Con, so just being there was fun. But really where I've had the most success and the most fun, like outside event is Festival of Oddities in Charlotte.
Okay.
Jen Carpenter that does the Dead Time, that has Dead Time Stories.
Yeah.
And the So Dead podcast, she puts that on and she does an awesome job. And for some reason I do really well there. She probably just does a really good job promoting and putting it together, and she does. But what I write, I think, tends to appeal to the people that like to go to the Festival of Oddities.
Why do you think that is?
So I tend to write darker fiction, which you might not tell by looking at me. A lot of people are pretty surprised by that, but so it's super short fiction, flash fiction, all less or around 1,000 words, and the themes tend to be a little bit on the darker side. I don't know why. I don't know why I started gravitating.
I was going to ask, like, what inspires that?
Humanity in general, I guess.
So you don't have
dark.
faith, like, you don't have good faith in humanity?
That's a loaded question. No, I'm really fascinated by the light and the dark of humanity, like that the good and the evil, and that people aren't just good and aren't just evil. There's a lot of shades of gray and a lot of in between. And so I think my stories kind of try to touch on that from the good to the bad. There's I shouldn't say a lot. There are some sweeter stories in there and nicer. But I try to keep it pretty, not to sound cliche, I try to keep it pretty real, I guess. And so, they're not necessarily all happy endings. They're not, everything doesn't wrap up nicely in the end. So
like kind of cliffhanger type endings.
Yeah, cliffhanger twists. With flash fiction, it is supposed to be a complete story in 1,000 words, so a beginning, middle, and end. So they do have endings, but kind of twists a lot of the time, and kind of open to interpretation endings, because that's just life.
Yeah.
There's never really a nice little bow at the end, or a nice little bow anywhere on any chapter or anything like that.
So I guess kind of going back, let's talk a little bit about you. Are you from the Lansing area? Were you born and raised here?
I am from the area. Yes, I'm from a little town called Stockbridge, nearby. I guess I'm terrible at directions. So I always say nearby. Yeah, off of 96, and then you have to drive another 20 minutes to even get to it. So
I think I've been there once. I think they have a bike trail, and I think I jumped on the bike trail there once when I was young. But
yeah, that goes a long way.
Yeah. It went forever. And I think at one point it was sand. It turned into sand. And like we were trying to ride bikes into this, like, it was like we're riding in a sand pit. It's like, it was almost impossible. I think we had to walk it at certain points.
Just a little extra challenge for you.
Yeah, a little extra exercise, I guess. So you grew up in Stockbridge?
Yeah.
And what brought you to Lansing?
What did bring me to Lansing? That's a good question. Oh, I'm sorry.
Is that uncomfortable?
No.
Okay. All right, you're good.
What did bring me to Lansing? I went to Grand Valley. I came home to the area. I was in Mason, where my mom was living. I worked at Bestsellers for quite a few years. Moved to Colorado for a year or so, have family out there. So just decided to do something different and lived out there for a little while.
Where'd you live in Colorado?
The Denver area.
Oh.
Yeah. Yeah. It was great. Loved it.
Did you go hiking a lot?
I didn't. I'm not a big hiker, but I would now. I wasn't then. I would go now.
Yeah.
I think if I were out there now, this was too many years ago to even put a number with it. But
too many years ago? How old are you?
Older than you'd think. Old enough that it was over 10 years ago that I lived in Colorado.
Oh, that's not that bad. I could say 10 years ago and I would still be an adult.
I did discover the other day that I have been out of Stockbridge longer than I lived there, though.
Really?
Just. So if you want to do math, then you can figure out how old I am. But
how long did you live in Stockbridge?
I moved out when I was 18.
Oh, okay.
And I didn't go back after school or anything. So you can do math there. If anybody wants to try it, they can figure it out. But I'll leave it a mystery.
How poetic. Poetic justice.
But I did come back. I was in a relationship and came back to get married, actually, and lived here with him for a little while. That relationship did not work out, but then I just stayed in Lansing. And, yeah, I've been here and around the area ever since.
Awesome.
So, yeah.
Cool. And so you like the Lansing area?
Yeah. It's always, I think, a loaded question whenever people talk about Lansing. They have a love-hate relationship with it, but what
do you think the hate is about it? What do you think people hate about it?
That's a good question. I feel like they think there's not a lot to do. I think the hate comes from probably more misconceptions than anything.
Yeah.
That there's not a lot to do. Maybe that was true at one point, actually.
Yeah. I think it's possible.
Yeah. Since I didn't grow up here, I don't know. I know now there's a lot of stuff going on and a lot of people building the community and a lot of stuff getting built, and I keep moving away from the microphone.
You can literally just drag it wherever you want.
Well, it happens when I talk with my hands and I move myself around. So I think they can think that there's not much to it, and it's not a Grand Rapids, and it's not a Chicago, and it's not a New York, and there's just not all these things. But I think if you really stop and take the time, and if you either have grown up here and seen the growth, or really immersed in one community or another, that's where the love part of it can come in. You can hate that it seems like we're not something else, but if you really dig in and really put the time and effort in, then
that's one thing I realized, because I actually grew up in Charlotte, and so like I wasn't a part of the Lansing community, obviously, but I then moved. I've moved around a lot, but then I obviously bought a house in Lansing, and that was like kind of my idea of Lansing. Like, there's not much to do here. I mean, obviously you have like the river trail, there's outdoor things you can do, but like as far as like going and doing like activities and stuff like that, for the longest time I'm like, this city is boring. There's not much to do. Like, it's not a Grand Rapids or it's not a Detroit, like you said. But as I started doing the podcast and interviewing people locally, there's a lot of things going on. There's like festivals almost every single weekend. There's some sort of event. Like, there's several events.
Yeah.
Every weekend. It's kind of crazy.
That's kind of what happened to me when I came back and started.
This episode is brought to you by Red Bike Delivery. This delivery service operates only using battery-powered, eco-friendly transportation. Red Bike Delivery is there for all your delivery needs, whether it's dinner for the family, flowers for your partner, or new houseplants for your new collection. Red Bike Delivery will gladly deliver those and everything in between. So what are you waiting for? Check out Red Bike Delivery on Facebook or Instagram for more information. Red Bike Delivery, because there's only one Earth.
Getting, more immersed in the different communities, like the writing community or the creative community. I started doing going to like open mics and things like that. And then the more I went to like those, and I would find out about something else. And then from that group, I would find out about something else. And so the more you start to actually actively go to things, you can't just sit at home and say there's nothing to do, because you're not going to be able to find it. Although now you can sit at home and find out what there is to do because of awesome sites like 517 Living and things like that. You can just go on your computer and see what's going on. And there's a lot. It's going to take a while to scroll through that calendar. So
tell me about it. My wife last night was just telling me, she's like, why don't I find out about things going on until after it happened? I'm like, you can just go to the calendar. There's a bunch of things on there.
Yeah, don't rely on your feed. The algorithm will show you things 2 days late, but go to the calendar and you'll find stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. That's one thing I found too about Lansing, is that like for creators and for like artists and writers and whatever it is, anybody of artistic abilities, there's a pretty big community here in Lansing. Would you agree with that?
Oh, for sure. Yeah. I mean, I'm part of the Artist Umbrella. Yeah. When I was researching your podcast, I obviously listened to Brandon's episode. Yeah. Brandon Navin, the executive director and founder of the Artist Umbrella. And I've kind of been on board with the organization almost from day one. I performed at the first event and came on board with the team probably after the third or so event. So almost since the very beginning. And it was right around the time kind of that I discovered the Artist Umbrella. I had just discovered like the Rio Town Reading Series, the Poetry Room, and I know I'll probably forget to name things, but all the different organizations happening. And then after getting plugged into the Artist Umbrella, it was like, whoa, there's so many creative people here. I mean, I won't dig into it too much because Brandon talked about it and he does an awesome job, but we put on a show every month, and every month we're able to find talent to fill those shows. So that I think just that alone says a lot about just the amount of talent here that we can find. So, I mean, we have repeats obviously because there are really talented people here that people want to see. But we're always able to find new talent almost every month. There's somebody new. So wow, that kind of speaks to.
I think it's important to have a place like that. Like, I mean, no disrespect in this, like in what I'm about to say, but like there's a place for misfits, right? Like that's the thing about like artists. Like they oftentimes feel like they're separate from a lot of people. But it kind of gives them like a home in a community to be around other people like-minded and people who can support what they're doing. Right? Am I right?
Yeah, for sure. And and the Artist Umbrella definitely gives that. Because I think there's all kinds of artists too. That often don't get a place on stage, even that we try to support and put out in the spotlight. Well, me for one, I mean, if you write fiction, you don't often think, open mics are for singers and musicians and poets even, but just this space allowed me to get up and read my flash fiction. And because it's short, it kind of lends itself to that. But that's unusual in itself to have a fiction writer get up and read it, things like that. And painters, we have painters come up on stage and do speed painting.
I've seen videos of them. Like, that's insane.
Yeah, and it's really awesome. So you don't expect to see a painter up on a stage.
Yeah.
So just giving that outlet, and then again, like you said, having the community where we can just be together and in a judgment-free zone
and bounce ideas off of each other and whatnot. Yeah. Like, do you guys give like criticism, like positive criticism? Like, hey, I like that, but maybe you should try it this way. Is there any of that?
Probably in small clumps or conversations after the show. We're not gonna critique anybody that has been on the stage or anything like that. We try to make it a very safe space, but obviously if there's something that needs work to make the show run more smoothly or something like that, we'll talk. But I'm sure there's pockets of people that have found kind of tribes within the Artist Umbrella that can bounce ideas off of each other and give that kind of feedback. And if anybody were to come ask, I mean, for sure we would offer what we could.
Right. Now, when did you start writing? When I feel like it's something. I mean, because you said your what you write about is dark most of the time, or like kind of not morbid, but How would you describe it? How would you describe the way you write and where it comes from?
Well, so I've been writing probably my whole life. My first story was written down by my mom because I couldn't write yet. So I just told her it and she wrote it down.
How old were you?
5 or something like that, probably before I could write.
Was it a good story?
I mean, it was more a narration of my day, I think. It was like, my brother hit me, I played Barbies, I'm going to sing a song, and then I literally made her write out Jingle Bells. So I have the paper, and it literally just says, Jingle Bells, Jingle Bells. I was like, oh, my poor mother. But, so yeah, since I could form thoughts, I wanted to put them on paper. I actually have a little book I made in 2nd grade. It was a story of some friends going to a haunted house, and one gets so scared that she pees her pants and
oh my gosh,
and runs out screaming, and they all run out screaming. So I actually have that, my very first book.
Wow.
From 2nd grade.
Did you ever get anybody, like any teachers, concerned about that? Like, wow, she's a little dark.
I don't think my stories from all of them were very dark. I mean, that one was just, they were in a haunted house. And, but I have other ones. Like, there was one about a talking frog and somebody that finds an egg, and it turns out to be a dinosaur egg. And actually all my stuff in middle school was probably very middle school girl oriented. It was about, best friends. And I had a novel I was writing from 8th grade through high school that was just about 2 best friends that wanted to be actresses. So it hasn't always been, well, actually I shouldn't say that. One of them dies in the end, but
hopefully that's not like true.
No, it is not true. Luckily. My best friend is still very much here, and I am super grateful for that. So not autobiographical at all. Didn't even ever want to be an actress. But I also really enjoyed Fear Street books. R.L. Stine, he wrote Goosebumps too, but his older kind of teenage version of Goosebumps was Fear Street. And they were kind of horror books, horror style for teens. My dad always watched horror movies when I was growing up and would liked to sit and kind of explain them. And so I'm actually not afraid of horror movies to this day. And I kind of blame him because I wish I were, but he explained, oh, that's ketchup. This is how they make the blood. This is how they do this. And because he really liked to watch them. And so I think to be able to watch them when we were around, he had to kind of make sure we weren't going to
get scared,
be up all night. So, so
You don't even get jumpy? You don't even get jumpy?
If somebody jumps, if something's loud, or, I jump. But
do you get a thrill out of it, though?
Yeah, I seek out. I'm like, okay, I hope this one will be good. I hope this one will creep me out a little bit. Because I do. That's always fun to be scared. I know people, I guess I shouldn't say that, not always. People don't always like that. People avoid horror movies. But
see, I've always found that horror movies, like actual horror movies, are never that scary. But like thrillers get me. Yeah,
and I think that's a little more what I'm drawn to is a psychological thriller.
Like when you have like a serial killer or something, and then it's just like all of a sudden they'll come out of nowhere, and they're there, and you're just waiting for that moment.
Yeah,
that's what gets me.
Or the ones that could actually happen. Like Scream is probably, it's a cheesy movie, but it's probably scarier in some sense than a lot of them because that's a little more likely to happen. You could have some psychopath that's doing that. It's a little more likely than like a poltergeist, or I guess that's debatable depending on what you believe, but or Chucky or It or something like that. Yeah. Scream to me is scarier than those because obviously it's probably not going to happen. But
so are you like one of the Halloween celebrators? Do you like Halloween a lot?
I do really like Halloween. I don't always probably celebrate it like I would want to. It's also right around my birthday. So my birthday and Halloween have also always
merged.
Pretty typically had duo celebrations. We used to go to haunted houses a lot when I was, well, there you go. Now we're getting into maybe where my horror fascination comes from. My birthday is always wanted to go to a haunted house. And my friends always got really scared. And I was the one dragging everybody
Let's go.
through. I'm like, come on, we can do this. We can get through this guy who probably is also just works in the neighborhood and has a chainsaw. We're fine. He's not actually going to murder you right now.
It's kind of funny because if you go in there like knowing that, okay, these people are just workers and they're not going to do anything to you. They're just going to try to scare you. Like you could talk yourself into not being scared.
Yeah.
Like I think now for the most part, I mean, at least I've only been to Jackson Underworld and like walking through that one, it's like, okay, it's not that scary for me.
Yeah. And I think probably because I've always been a writer and always been, interested in the behind the story or behind the person's story, it's always been, more clear to me that this is just a person,
right?
And this is just made up, and I make up stuff like this all the time. So, yeah. So I got my inspiration from probably Fear Street books. Also, I guess the flash fiction part of it. I was just thinking about this not that long ago and listening to some 90s country music.
Like what?
Like
Shania Twain or like girl music or like guy country singers?
Well, it was like a mix. It was a mix. It was like a 90s playlist on Spotify, but plug. I don't know, I just turned it on, but I was realizing a couple of years ago actually that kind of music probably inspired a lot of what I write. I really liked the songs that like told a story, like Fancy by Reba McEntire. The Night the Lights Went Out in Georgia by Reba McEntire. When the Thunder Rolls by Garth Brooks. Like those told huge stories in like the span of like 4 minutes.
Yeah.
So I was always fascinated by those, and I would listen to them, and some of my favorites were the ones that told the story, not just were like, hey, I like you, or hey, so-and-so broke up with me and now I'm sad. Like those were nice, and I like a lot of those too, but the ones that really like stick with you are the ones that really tell.
It's funny looking at you. I wouldn't guess that you listen to country music. But then you tell me you're from Stockbridge. It's a small town. Like, okay, that makes sense.
Yeah.
So did you grow up listening to country?
Yeah. I mean, I listened to other stuff too, but I would say I listened to country. Most of my friends, or a lot of my friends, listened to country, and I don't think my family really listened to it, but I listened to it, and yeah. And I mean, that would have been when I was listening to songs like that was, in middle school and through high school and things like that, and just that era, the 90s.
It's such a good era.
Yeah, it really was. I'm going through the playlist. I'm just like, oh, that's such a good song. Oh, that's another good one. Oh man, I just really want to. And when the windows, that's when my Stockbridge roots come out, I guess, when the weather gets nice and the windows go down. It's the 90s playlist, 90s country that comes out, and I just crank it out. And I've had country. I don't listen to it as much anymore, but I've had country on the radio and taken my car in to like get fixed in Lansing, and they're like, I don't hear this around here very often. I'm like, all right.
Especially the old country, right? Because like new country, I mean, is even on the pop stations, like Florida Georgia Line and some of the other ones. But some of the old country, like Reba and Garth Brooks. I guess Garth Brooks is kind of on the radio. He's kind of made a turn, like in today's music. He's touring and everything. He's pretty big still, but yeah, there's some other ones. There's actually I was just at a concert just recently. Who was it? It was Lone Star and what was the other one? I don't remember the other one, but the other one was so good. I can't remember his name. Anyways, the concert was amazing, and I've never heard him before. And the first time I seen him was on stage at Soaring Eagle, and I'm like, wow, how do I not know this? This guy is amazing. I don't remember where I was going with that now. But yeah, he put on a great show. He was like up on the stage dancing around the whole show. It was amazing.
Yeah.
I wish I could remember who it was.
Yeah, I went and saw Garth in concert, and that was probably one of the best concerts. I mean, that's probably the best concert I've ever seen. He was dancing. I mean, not dancing, but running around on stage the whole time. And it was his second concert of the night. It was his second show. And you could just tell that he loved what he does and wants to put on a good show for the people,
Yeah.
and doesn't want it to look like it's his second show, and doesn't want to give the second people like less of a show than the first people got. And you can just tell. And I think that's what made it so good. You could just tell that he was passionate about it.
And that's what makes you have respect for an artist too, is like when they put their passion into what they love. Like, I mean, because he could easily put everything he had into the first show, and then the second show just be like, I'm just making money now. But he wanted to put on a performance.
Yeah.
I love that about artists.
Yeah.
Now, I don't remember what I was going to ask.
How super off track there.
Yeah, we
country music.
So that's kind of where you get your flash writing from, right? Is the country music, how they told stories, and then you kind of implemented it into your story, into your stories.
Yeah, and I think that was kind of a subconscious thing because I loved those so much. I got into flash fiction. I'd been writing for a long time, or trying to write for a long time. And, I always just thought, if you're a writer, you write a novel. That's what you do.
Right.
I want to do this. So obviously I need to write a novel, get it published, have it on bookshelves.
Yeah.
Growing up, that was the thing. And the industry, started to shift and has shifted so much since then, that all these doors kind of started opening up, and it wasn't the same path. It wasn't just that traditional path. And kind of along when the industry was shifting, I discovered events. When I knew there was an event, I would forget. So I'm glad it came up here. Like Fiction 440 is an event here in Lansing, where they give you 3 words at like one event. They'll give you 3 words, and then you write a story in 440 words or less using those 3 words.
Wow.
And then you can read it at the next event.
How many times can you use those 3 words? As many times as you want.
Yeah.
Is that the is that the purpose?
Don't really write the whole story, like just out with those words, but yeah.
Right.
And the words, it's meant to make it a bit of a challenge, but also give you kind of somewhere to start.
Can you give me an example of like 3 words that you would be given?
Oh gosh. I mean, anything really. Like you could just look around the room, like guitar, camera, map, like.
Oh, okay.
They would just give you 3 words, and you would have to put those into the story. Like they don't have to start the story.
Okay.
But they have to be in there somewhere.
Right.
And so I started going to that and started having fun with that. And then I also discovered some contests online that were like flash fiction or short story contests, where they did something similar. They gave you some prompts. So they gave you a genre, a location, and an object that would have to be in the story. And then you got that at, like Friday night at midnight, and then you had 48 hours to write the story.
Oh, wow.
Using those prompts within that super tight deadline. And because it was either flash or short story, there was a word limit. So between all of these things, discovering super short fiction, realizing I didn't have to write a novel length story in order to have something good, having prompts from these words or these subjects that they were giving you kind of helped get started, because when you have, the whole wide world of things to choose from to write about, it's really hard to start, at least for me.
Yeah.
Some people I envy just have ideas all the time, and people kind of, I think that about me, but I really like prompts.
Yeah, you're always posting on social media, like I'm writing, or I don't know.
Yeah, but it takes work, and it
does.
It's not just, and it's a lot of the times it's because, and now it's almost like it's a muscle that I've exercised, so it's a little easier. But to get me going again, when I was really stuck, prompts really helped. The deadline of the 48 hours of those contests really helped. I'm really much better under pressure than when I have all the time in the world. So when I had all the time in the world to just write a novel, that didn't happen.
Right, right.
But when I started having the deadlines of, Fiction 440, there's a couple months between events. So you had time, and I would usually write it in the 2 days before anyway. But these contests were 48 hours. And really most of the stories in my books here are stories from either Fiction 440 or that I wrote for the contest, or after I started doing those more often and realized that I really liked flash fiction, I started kind of just doing my own. I would just put on my own writing weekends.
Oh,
and
where do you do that at?
Just online.
Oh, okay.
Just ask anybody that wants to participate. I would just give the prompts to make it harder for myself. I would have somebody else just pick 3 words and tell them to me, and I would just post it and say, okay, whoever's participating, we're going to write a story in.
Now, do the words have to be like nouns or verbs? It doesn't matter?
No, it really doesn't matter.
Wow.
I mean, I think they try not to do like proper nouns.
Yeah.
Like people.
Right.
Just to keep it a little more varied. If you pick a person, you're obviously going to have much more specific things to write about, but like a doctor or doctor could be a word.
Okay.
But like,
but it couldn't be like, does it have to be a word that describes something?
I mean, it could be frankly whatever word. I don't know. It could be anything.
Just any word. Just any word.
I mean, if they've been doing Fiction 440 for a very long time, so they've had to come up with some words. So I can't, of course, think of any off the top of my head. If I took a second, I could probably find the next event and see what the words were. But so between like all of those things, it's kind of where my books came from, basically. And then what got me unstuck. And it's now kind of the formula that I use. My headphones keep slipping off my head, so sorry.
Oh, you're good.
I can feel them just like making their way back. And so that really helped me get writing when I was stuck, for one, and then also realize with the changing industry and everything shifting in the way that it was, that I could publish whatever I wanted. It didn't have to be a novel. Right. It didn't even have to be short stories, which is, if you're going to publish a collection, short stories were typically the more accepted form, which short stories tend to be anywhere from like 2,000 to 10,000 words.
Okay.
And so then knowing I had, like, with all the different ways to publish and do self-publishing, knowing I could publish whatever I wanted, and realizing I was beating myself up and saying, I want to publish a book, but I can't write a book. And then looking at all that I had, I was like, I have a book. Like, I have all these stories that are just sitting here that aren't doing it, that I like, that other people like. Like, I got really good feedback when I would read them at Fiction 440 and submit them for these contests. So I had all this material, and I was like, I can publish these. Like, I don't have to wait for a publisher to tell me that they're good or
that
whatever.
They're not.
Yeah.
Like, I'm sure they'll be more critical in that way, like, of the stories that are going into it. And then that way you can publish whatever you want.
Yeah.
You don't have to worry about somebody else.
And frankly, there's things probably about this that, traditional publishers probably aren't looking for flash fiction. They're not looking for, super short stories like this, at least at the moment. They like you to stay within one genre. That was another thing that I really liked about what I decided to do, is that I could write in whatever genre I wanted. And the contest actually helped me realize I liked writing all over the map, because they would give you a genre. So the first time I ever wrote a sci-fi story was for one of those contests. And I had never had any desire to write a sci-fi story, but I had to try it, and it was a lot of fun.
That's awesome.
And
how hard is it to make it as a writer? As an author,
make it as a writer?
Like, I mean, obviously, like you said, that there's not like a huge market for this, for flash fiction. What is the market like for that?
I think it's growing.
Okay.
And I think it's just about, I think right now, to make it, which I guess depending on how you define make it, could be different. Like,
to make a sustainable living. Yeah.
It's marketing. You have to be really good at marketing and the marketing side of it, and understand marketing probably more than the average person. I'm lucky in that my partner, Jesse, actually runs a local web company, and he digs into the marketing side of things and funnels and sales funnels and things like that. And he is learning those things inside out. I've worked in marketing as a writer for a while, so we both kind of have a behind the scenes knowledge of that. I'm not making my living as a writer right now, so obviously, like, even having the knowledge that we do is still a challenge. It is harder to market books like I have, I think, than probably a traditional novel because people aren't used to it. They don't really know what it is. But once people hear me give my pitch, a lot of the times they're very interested. I tell them it's super short fiction, all less or around 1,000 words, collection of stories where you can read each story in 5 minutes or less. So perfect for people that like to read but don't always have the time.
That's perfect for me.
And people with shorter attention span.
That's why I bought it, because like the thing is, like I work a lot and I'm tired at the end of the day, and typically like when I would read would be like when I'm going to bed.
Yep.
And when I start reading, I just like start falling asleep. And so like something like that, it's perfect for me.
Yeah, you can read it, and not have to worry about remembering what you read the next night, trying to like go back, because you could finish a whole story before you doze off.
Yeah.
You can read it in car line waiting to pick up your kids. You can read it in line at the grocery store.
I feel like you're telling me there's no excuse for me not reading this.
I mean, pretty much. I mean, I didn't say it, but I mean, you could pick up a story, and in the time I did my pitch or went on one of my rants, you probably could have read a whole story just sitting here. He could, your friend, your sound guy here could be reading my stories right now, and he would probably be through the whole book by the time we're done talking.
Probably.
So no excuses. And so once I give that spiel, like people are interested, but it's just not something they're used to seeing.
Yeah.
But more, the more I watch the market and watch Amazon and things like that, like there are more and more flash story collections coming out. There's writers doing workshops on how to write flash fiction.
Okay.
And there's a lot of stuff like that coming out more and more. So it definitely is picking up in momentum. But it's just about making it. I think it's just about finding your niche, getting really good at it, being really passionate about it, having the time and energy to put in a ton of marketing. I was going to swear, I don't know if I'm allowed.
Yeah, absolutely.
A shit ton of marketing. And just really, really be able to just go hard at that. Go hard at YouTube, go hard at Instagram, go hard at TikTok.
I was going to suggest something. I think you should start a flash fiction podcast.
And I've thought about that. I will probably actually start reading or putting up stories on YouTube.
Okay.
I'll probably do a lot like you do. Read, record video, put the video up on YouTube, but put the audio up on a podcast.
Okay.
So I have a lot of plans. I've actually written a novel since then, flash fiction has helped me get going again and get the creative energies flowing. I always have to pause because I like the phrase creative energies rather than creative juices. So I always have to stop myself, and it gets the creative energies going. And actually since then I've kind of switched gears. I wrote a novel over the pandemic, and switched gears to kind of helping other people get writing again. So I also discovered yoga. And I got my yoga certification over the pandemic.
So what kind of yoga do you do?
Mostly vinyasa. I don't know if
Okay.
that means anything to you or to the listeners.
Yeah, I do yoga all the time.
Okay. Nice. Yeah. So mostly vinyasa, actually only vinyasa at the moment. And so I teach at the Micah Art Gallery downtown or in Old Town, every Tuesday. So it's art surrounded by yoga, or yoga surrounded by art. Even as a writer, words are hard. And so I'm kind of switching gears. I also have started a brand called Creative Warrior to kind of help other creatives, and creatives can be anyone. Like you would be considered a creative putting on your podcast. It's not just people who write or do art or write music or anything like that. Entrepreneurs need to be creative. Teachers,
right.
Parents, moms, stay-at-home moms need to be creative. Like everybody needs to be creative, but creativity doesn't just come to you. It doesn't. It's like what I was saying earlier. It takes practice. It takes discipline. It takes tools like deadlines, prompts, word parameters, and things like that to help you be creative. So Creative Warrior helps creators fight for their creativity through things like yoga, writing exercises.
And this is an event that you put on?
This is a brand.
A brand.
So okay. I have the Facebook page up. I have a Creative Warriors group on Facebook. And the ultimate goal is to, and we're in the process of building it right now, is to start a membership community. So a site where you can go and get these tools. You can get yoga flows. You can get, I'll probably do writing challenges with prompts and, write a story in 48 hours situation. We'll read creativity books together, do book clubs and things like that. But basically the idea is that also community is an important part, like we already talked about, of being creative. And in the Creative Warrior community, you can have that. You can be around other like-minded people. It'll be all online, obviously, but you'll still have that ability to communicate with others. If you're stuck, go online and talk to other people that are also stuck or that were stuck and are no longer stuck anymore. And the idea is just to help people get unstuck, because I was stuck for a long time before I discovered flash fiction. I was beating myself up for not writing, and creators who aren't creating, it doesn't feel good.
Yeah, no, I definitely get that, because it's the same way for me. Like if I don't do a podcast, and even I think I might have talked to you before about writing a book. Like I've wanted to write a book, about my life and whatnot. And then that's why I started the podcast, because I'm like, I don't have time to write. I'm so busy, so busy. But not like the podcast helps with that at all. But
you could have been writing in the time that you did the podcast. But.
Yeah, no, definitely could. But I feel like this is more fun for right now. But I definitely would like to write an autobiography. Can't talk. Where was I going with that? I don't remember now.
Well,
but my question was, when you are stuck, what kind of things other than yoga do you do? Do you like go for a jog? Do you do some extensive exercise to get some blood flowing? What do you do?
Yeah. So I think I wrote a blog post about this a while ago, and I have to repost it, or bring it to the forefront. Yoga is a big part of it. I have always said that, because I really just discovered yoga in the last 5 years or so, and kind of said that the years I've been doing yoga have been the most creatively productive years that I've ever had. So, the two have to be correlated. There's got to be some correlation. And the more I learned about yoga, and how and then not just the physical part of it, but the energetic part of it as well, and how it relates. We actually have energy centers called chakras. And there's actually one specifically that's kind of also known as the creative chakra. Your sacral chakra is kind of your center of creativity, and yoga and doing the right kind of yoga flows and the right poses can actually stimulate that and can stimulate creativity. And then your communication, your throat chakra kind of centers on communication and your ability to express yourself. So when either of those are blocked, you can feel blocked creatively. And
what poses help with that? Maybe I should start doing that before a podcast.
The throat chakra is a fun one. There's something called lion's breath that I'm not going to do it because it would sound awful in the microphone right now. You can do it from your hands and knees. So on tabletop, and you basically stick your tongue out and take a really deep breath in and just exhale. I'm going to move away from the microphone and
okay.
Just
release everything,
but stick your tongue out so you look absolutely ridiculous. But it stimulates the throat chakra. And I can't think of any for that one anymore. Oh, fish pose is another one that I can't really even describe. You lay on your back and kind of really stretch your neck, put the top of your head on the ground, and I'm not gonna, if you go on my web, find me on Creative Warrior, all of these, I have these one place or another that you can actually see, or just Google fish pose, you'll find it. And then for the creative chakra, it's actually kind of right behind our belly buttons. Anything that opens the hips. So hip opening, poses will help that. And I just personally really like, and it does stretch the hips, the warrior poses, warrior 1 and warrior 2. I feel like they help you feel really strong and really powerful. And when you feel like that, it's going to be a lot harder to kind of feel stuck or sorry for yourself or blah, so just getting up. And so getting up and moving, definitely helps. So I will, if I'm stuck, get up and move for one. Honestly, I do things that aren't related to writing while reading, which is related. But so I'll reading something else, probably not necessarily related to what you're writing, can help just get your brain moving. A walk, again, which is physical, but just getting out of the house, fresh air, things like that.
I know you said that you work from home.
Mm-hmm.
So like I feel like as far as creativity, that would kind of like stifle it a little bit, right? Like
yeah, so going to work in a coffee shop actually is one thing that I do. If I'm feeling stuck, just getting out of the house and working somewhere else. Anything that kind of you don't have to think about, pardon me, doing the dishes, doing laundry, things like that. So actually when I'm writing these stories for these contests, I'll do an initial brain dump kind of after, actually a lot of time you get the prompt at midnight. So I'll read the prompt and then just go to sleep. I don't even start writing
till the morning.
That night. I just sleep on it. And then in the morning, I'll kind of do like a big brain dump of anything that I've thought of that has to do with the prompt. And then I walk away and I put it down and I go take a walk or I do the dishes or do all the things you have to do because they're usually over weekends. So do all the things you also have to do on the weekends. And then come back to it. And so kind of writing in bursts and then come and maybe just write out a first draft, like just let it go and
you don't lose your like where you're going with it or like your ideas.
Not usually after the first brain dump, because after the first brain dump, it's just kind of a brain dump. It's not anything cohesive. And so it's not like waiting for the next thing to get added or anything like that. And I wouldn't, if I was at a point where like I would need to remember the next thing or one thing was leading to another, I probably wouldn't stop. It's when I hit that stopping point that I'm like, okay, I really can't think of what should come next here. I'm not going to sit at my desk and just beat myself up.
Right. Because at that point, you're probably not really that creative, right?
Then that's when I'll get up and do something else. So it's kind of a fine line because I do believe discipline is really important and like butt in seat is really important. It's not just if you just sit and write whenever you feel like sitting and writing, it's not always going to happen.
Right. That's what I was going to ask you. Do you have like set times where you like specifically write like, okay, like during this time and this time, that's when I'm writing?
I try to. I'm not perfect at it, but when I'm actively working on something, yes. When I want to get something finished, yes. Right now, my focus is kind of more on the Creative Warrior and the Creative Warrior community. So I've not been actively writing stories as much as I want. But when I am writing, I try to either have a couple hours in the evening. Morning actually is best. I've kind of shifted my work schedule so that I have a little extra time in the morning to do something for me, whether it's working on a story or writing or working on the Creative Warrior community. So morning is kind of my time to do whatever I want.
Okay.
At least.
Now with the Creative Warrior thing, are you going to do any like live yoga classes or anything like that?
I'll probably do.
I feel like that's a good idea.
Yeah.
It's a good move.
So you're not asking, you're suggesting.
I would do it.
A live yoga?
Yeah, I would do it.
So I've done some Zoom classes. I was doing kind of my Tuesday night class on Zoom when COVID cases went back up. I moved to Zoom. I'm gonna record and do a lot more videos on YouTube. So prompt paired with a yoga flow.
Okay.
So I'll probably record a video and give a prompt and then walk through a quick little yoga flow and say, here's your prompt, let's do some yoga, and then you can go create. So I'll have a whole series of those kind of videos for people in that community. Those might be on YouTube, so open to people outside of the community as well. But yeah, live is a good idea, and I'm not opposed to it. Probably and live creating sessions too.
Yeah.
Where you just kind of get on camera and sit. I did a lot of those during the pandemic, and people really responded well. We had morning sessions where before people started their workday, we all just logged on to Zoom or Messenger calls or whatever we had at our disposal, and just created together. We just either left our cameras on or off, whatever you wanted to do, muted ourselves. So we weren't talking to each other. We just we just knew everybody was there. Yeah. And you could leave your camera on, or your mic on if you wanted, but, and talk and come on and, hey, ask a question or things like that. And so that was really helpful. So just the power of community, I think, is really important and a big reason why I want to create this community.
That's what I think is cool. That you're kind of your yoga is inspired by writing. I love that you're using it to inspire that demographic of people. It's kind of cool.
Yeah. Yeah. And when I found out, I started yoga and I was like, oh, great. Cause I've never been a big workout person. I struggled to find workouts that I liked. And I was like,
you don't like lifting weights?
No. I didn't even people my family thinks it's hilarious that I do that I'm so into yoga now. And even since I've been into yoga, I've gotten more into just working out in general. And the more I've learned about living a healthy lifestyle, the more I'm like, okay, being active and things like that. But I was on a segment called Workout Wednesday on WILX. And my brother, my mom thought this was hilarious. Me as a kid, you would never imagine that I would be on a segment called Workout.
Oh, that's
or Work
hilarious.
It Out. No, Workout Wednesday.
That's funny.
Yeah. So you can find that on I posted it. Where did I post it? I think the Creative Warrior. Yeah. The Creative Warrior Facebook page. I posted the segment on there. So yeah, sorry, you asked me. Oh yeah.
I said you're not into lifting weights or anything like that.
Right. And then connecting yoga with writing. So then I discovered yoga, and it was a nice way to just be active and work out more.
Yeah.
But then when I really discovered more about how it can help with creativity and the chakras and just
now aside from the creativity side of it and doing it for writing and all that, do you find yoga to be create mental clarity? Does it help you with maybe depression or anxiety or anything like that? Because I find that when I'm doing yoga, especially at the end of a hard yoga session, doing the meditation part of that helps me tremendously, especially because I'll do a workout and then I'll do a yoga session and then the meditation session afterwards okay. And then sometimes I can kind of drift off into this place where it's I'm just non-existent.
Yeah. I mean, it's really powerful for all of that. It's really when I was taking my certification, just learning more about, the connection between yoga and also meditation and what it can do, what meditation can do for your brain, and how scientifically meditation can actually rewire your brain. And just the principles of yoga, are really powerful, and just the mindset that we're all connected. And the instructor that kind of led my training would always say, and I don't know if she made this up or it was she got it somewhere else either, she would always just say, we're all divine beings having a human experience. So I think just the principles of yoga and remembering that, and yoga also means yoke and unite, that's a really weird way of saying unite. Unity and all of that. So all those principles I think are really helpful. Am I a perfect yogi? No. Do I ever get, do I still get frustrated and mad and upset? Yes. Right. But the days when I'm doing yoga, or the weeks where I'm doing yoga more consistently, do I always do it every day? No.
Yeah.
But also having yoga and if you know enough about the principles of yoga, you can forgive yourself for those things. You don't have to be perfect. You don't have to be, you can always come back to it. It's not like, I haven't done it for a week now. I guess I'm just not a yoga person. So I'm not going to do it anymore. I have to give up on myself. It kind of shifts your mindset in that, that you can always come back to it.
Yeah.
And it doesn't, have to be complicated. I think a lot of people just see yoga as the poses.
Mm-hmm.
Really, it's the breath. Like it comes back to that unite thing. It's uniting the body and the mind through the breath. So if you're conscious of your breath, if you're sitting in a seat somewhere and you're conscious of your breath and you're using your breath to kind of center yourself, you're doing yoga. So I think a lot of people think, oh, I can't do yoga or it can't help me because I can't move like that or I can't get into those poses or, and it doesn't, you can start wherever you can start. And
I just recently turned my dad, who is not physically fit whatsoever and has never worked out like pretty much a day in his life, except for when maybe he was younger. But I just recently turned him on to yoga and he's like, it's helped me tremendously, like with the flexibility, because he was having like back problems. I'm like, you need to like stretch, like you need to like be active. And I think yoga is like a good fundamental way to get into shape. Not to like build muscle or anything, but you're going to make those you're going to build those small muscles and like the things that like matter for movement and whatnot, right?
It's really powerful. It's a full body workout. It's hard when it needs to be, but it can be super hard. But it also doesn't have to be. So it can be whatever you need it to be, which I think is what's really cool about it.
What's really cool is you can do like you could do a hard version, and then you can make it easier. Like you can make that pose easier.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's also a really great tool for a lot of other things. One reason I kept with it, like after I discovered that it was good for creativity, but then I also discovered that it was actually a really powerful tool for addiction. My dad actually passed away. He was an alcoholic and passed away from complications from alcoholism when I was 15. And yoga, when I realized that yoga can actually help, and there's a very specific kind of yoga called Ashtanga that actually can help addicts stay sober, and can
How
really, I think it's because of, and it's my goal to study it more and learn more about it down the road. But I think because Ashtanga is a pretty, vinyasa, you can kind of work your flows however you want. You can move from warrior two and move through the different poses. Ashtanga has a set of poses that you go from this one to this one to this one. It's the same every time. It's a little more disciplined. It's a little more, you can get in vinyasa, you can get a little more flowy. You can kind of move, but vinyasa is very, more about posture. And I think that helps. So you're very focused on the movement and it gives you something to work toward. And when
how does that keep you from wanting to drink? Or addiction anyways?
Yeah. And I can't speak to that personally because, not having struggled with addiction myself.
What did you struggle with?
I don't know.
Unless you don't want to talk about it.
No, I mean, I'm just saying I have someone in my life who struggled from addiction.
Right. Sorry.
Luckily, I have not had that struggle, just as an outsider looking in. So I'm not exactly sure like how it helps specifically. I just know, and I think it can help. It can just develop discipline. So, and when you learn how to work through an uncomfortable pose or an uncomfortable moment using your breath, you can then take those tools out into the world and say, okay, this is an uncomfortable moment, but I know that I can just breathe through it. I know that I had the discipline this morning in class to stick to this pose, even though it was uncomfortable and it hurt, or it shouldn't hurt, and it was uncomfortable.
Well, it might hurt. It might hurt to have to be able to go through that process.
Yeah. So emotionally it might hurt.
Yeah.
Yes. The physical poses should never actually hurt. And if they hurt,
You're doing it wrong.
You should move out of it a little bit and ease up. But so if you have that discipline, then you know, it's easier to go off the mat and have that discipline in real life. And I cannot, I don't want to put words in the mouth of someone struggling with addiction. So I don't know if that's 100% true, but
yeah.
And I think yoga also just really helps with self-worth and seeing that you are worthy. It just helps with mindset and all those mindset and self-esteem, and really getting you into that mindset of, we are all human. We're all divine beings having a human experience. We're all having the same human experience.
Mm-hmm.
We're all struggling. But we're all also worth being here. We're worthy of being here. And so I think just from, again, my outside experience watching it, that's one theory I had about my dad. I think he always wanted to get better, quote unquote, for other people. I actually have his journals from rehab. He was also a writer, a songwriter, a musician.
That's where you get it from.
Yeah. Which, surprised it didn't come up earlier, but so I have all his words, and he often said that he wanted to get better, for his parents. He wanted to prove he could do it. He wanted to get ready better for his wife and his kids. But I never once saw him say he wanted to get better for himself, because he thought he was worthy of getting better, or worthy of, being in this life, or however you want to say that.
Right. Did he have childhood trauma?
Yeah. So there was a lot of that, and a lot of that in his journals and all of that. And so I think, obviously, not getting too psychological here, he used the alcohol to kind of, work through that, but then also, and to make sure it was, his father was not a nice man, and he probably wanted to be very unlike his father, but, as the circle of life goes, kind of ended up just circling back. Generational trauma will do that. So
yeah, absolutely.
But that's one way I think that yoga can help as well. And that is one of my goals in the long run, is to use yoga to help those struggling with addiction, whether it's through the actual physical poses, or through the mindset or aspect of it, or even, using yoga and creativity to help give those with addiction, a place to channel that.
Right.
I also have experimented and want to get into more using fiction and short fiction to work through personal trauma. I actually started, once I discovered flash fiction, it kind of spiraled into, and when I started reading locally and seeing others read and share their such personal stories, I had never really written that much about my dad, but it kind of inspired me, seeing everyone else being willing to share such deep personal stories. So because I had the tools through flash fiction, it actually gave me, the strength and the tools I needed to start writing about him and my experience with that. So I actually have a pretty decent collection of stories now that I read publicly about him and about my thoughts and feelings about our situation. And I was going somewhere else with that. So that helped me kind of work through my feelings about him, and feelings I hadn't addressed at all until 20 years after he had passed. And it just helped me really kind of let some things go. And so I feel like writing, or any sort of creative tool, but for me personally, writing can be really powerful and help others do that.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, it can help others kind of just face what they might have been afraid to face.
I agree with you on so many different things. For one, the one thing I do agree with, the first thing is working out. Like, working out for me has helped. Like, I don't really have any addiction problems except for maybe to food. I love
Don't we
food.
all?
But like one thing I realized that when I'm working out, like extreme workouts, like I'm not focused on eating bad food. Like it creates like a sense of discipline, like you had said, and it creates like the sense of focus. Like I'm now focused on one thing, and that's just to be healthy. So I get that, like, as far as like how that might help somebody with addiction, because like if they then focus that energy, put that energy and focus on something else, then they realize that, okay, that's my goal. I don't want to fall back on that. And then also with the, you writing your story, you writing to tell your story. That's one thing I've realized too with the podcast. Like for me is like, I have a pretty traumatic past. But I started the podcast by telling my story. But by having other people on, other people that, you know, have gone through some of the same things, like I've been able to sit here and talk about it. And honestly, like my past does not affect me whatsoever anymore. Like it used to get to the point like where I would be in the middle of a workout and I would think about something like my adoptive mom said. Like one thing she told me all the time was, "You're never going to amount to anything." So that'd be something that would play over and over and over in my head. So I'd be like in the middle of a workout, be like, "Oh, I am going to amount to something." No, I don't know, but you know, that would play in my head and it'd be motivation. But now it's like, I think about that and it doesn't affect me. And by doing the podcast and talking to other people who have experienced some of the same things, it's helped me tremendously. So I get how that would help you.
Yeah. And just reading, and every time I read my stories, the personal ones out in public, you know, there's always someone in the audience that says, you know, "Oh my gosh, you know, thank you for reading that. You could have been reading about my experience," or "My mom was an alcoholic," or "My dad, you know, I also lost this person. You know, you put into words what I didn't know, you know, how to express," because it brings up a lot of complicated feelings. Like you don't know how you feel about this person. You know, obviously you love them, but a lot is happening. So just to be able to put that out there and know that other people relate is powerful.
Yeah.
And so for you to, you know, share your story to kick things off is a really awesome thing to do, because then people can feel like they can come on and also share their story.
Yeah.
And so I think it all comes back to community. And like, I never would have felt brave enough to read my story if I hadn't gone to open mics in the area and saw others reading their stories.
Right.
I had never considered, you know, writing something about my dad and actually getting up and reading it in front of people. And then, you know, I went to the first couple and just read fiction, which was fun. And I still, you know, enjoy getting up and reading my fiction every now and then. But I think what really resonates and has the most impact is getting up and reading the personal stories. And it's all about, you know, it's all about connection and community. And when one of us is open and honest, everybody else can feel, you know, open and honest and able to do the same thing. And then when we're all able to be open and honest, you know, who knows what could happen to the world if we could all feel comfortable talking about our...
I think it makes everybody nicer, because then everybody has a greater appreciation for each other, right? Like if I know what you've gone through, you know what I've gone through. Like, okay, now we know who we are. Like that's how you are you. Like I know what makes you up now.
Yep.
Now you said I want to wrap this up here soon, because I think we're over an hour.
Oh no.
I don't know what you have to do tonight, but it is Friday, so I'm sure you have something to do.
Yeah, go home and do nothing. That's what I'm gonna go do.
Yeah, you're an adult. You worked all day. Yeah, I get that.
I used to never understand how, like, on Fridays my mom would, you know, be so tired. She's like, "It's Friday night. I don't want to do it." We'd be like, "It's Friday. We have to do all these things." And she's like, "No, it is Friday. I don't want to do anything." And now I get it.
Boring.
Now I get it. I'm like, I'm sorry, Mom. I'm sorry I made you try to do things on Friday nights.
Yeah, I get that too. I get out of work and I'm like, I just want to go home.
That's what Saturday's for.
Yeah, absolutely.
Sorry, not to derail again.
No, you're good. So you said you wrote a novel since this book, right?
Yeah, so I actually have so you have Flash in the Dark in front of you. I also have another collection of short stories called The Problem with Humans and Other Stories.
I like the way that sounds.
So, and I always say it was the best thing I ever did naming that book because when I have it stacked on a table, you know, people walking by are kind of like, problem with humans. I got to see what that's about. And it's about the same length as the one you have in front of you. And I always say it's, they'll see it and I'm like, I know it's definitely not long enough, but I don't have that kind of time. But it is the title of one of the stories in the book. So I just made it the title. And then I do have a novel mostly finished. There's probably always editing and polishing that can be done. But I did get it finished and off to, it's my first attempt at kind of just querying agents and seeing how the traditional publishing world would work and what they might think of it. Again, I know I always have this option to self-publish, and honestly, it's still might be what I do with my book, but I just kind of wanted to put it out there.
Yeah, I love that you're open to whatever.
Yeah,
that's awesome.
And see. So it's it's actually a Neverland story.
Oh.
It's called The Lost Girl, a Neverland story. So it was definitely like a passion project. It was an idea that had just been in my head and finally just had to get it down. So I love the movie Hook. I love the Peter Pan story itself too, and it's really fascinating, but I loved the movie Hook. So this is takes place after the events of Hook. And it is about Peter Pan's great-great-granddaughter. She is diagnosed with a terminal illness, and her mother, who is well aware of, her great-grandfather's past and who he was, decides to try to send her daughter to Neverland to see if it will save her life. Because she's been diagnosed, and you do not grow up in Neverland. So she's kind of, experimenting and says, if you never grow up, maybe this illness won't affect you there. So she sends her daughter off to Neverland, and it is about Angela's adventures in Neverland. Oh. And I won't say anything else. I won't say whether it...
You're making me want to read it.
Well, yeah, that's the point, right?
Yeah,
so,
that's awesome.
She has adventures with Lost Boys, and Hook, if you saw the end of Hook, is now out of the picture, and Smee is now captain and has taken over the ship, and so it is about their adventures.
Very cool. I like that.
Yeah.
And that is available on...
It is not available anywhere at the moment. So, but your other teaser there.
Your other books are available, though.
My other books are available. They are available on Amazon. But if you are local to the Lansing area and you want some, feel free to reach out to me to get them. They actually, it doesn't really matter. Amazon tends to drop the price of the books randomly. So you might be able to get them for a lower price, but I think I get the same amount of royalties. So
okay,
I put that out there. Whether you want to get them on Amazon, or you can reach out to me and get them directly from me, and I will sign them for you. So however you want to do it, I did.
Mine is signed.
Yes, I will sign them, and if you can find 2 signatures that are the same, I will give you a prize. I feel like my signature is different every single time, and even looking at that, I'm like, oh, interesting. What style was I trying out there? Yeah, so you can get them on Amazon. You can find me on Facebook. So I've tried to split up my brands a little bit. You can find me as author Allison Spooner for my author page that has all my writings and all sorts of things. If you go far enough back, you can find me reading some of my stories. I did do live. You mentioned going live for yoga. I did do live readings at the beginning of the pandemic every day at noon when we were all stuck at home.
I seen those. I watched them.
Yeah, I was doing some lunchtime readings there, and those are still up. I do have a site called Snack Size Fiction that you can find some of my stories on. You can, if you Google me, you can basically find.
Yeah, I was gonna say you sound like you're everywhere.
Me everywhere. I am everywhere. Creative Warrior, if you're interested in that, and the community that will be up very, very soon. You can find Creative Warrior itself has a page on Facebook. Creative Warriors is the group. If you want to be a part of the group, we just do a little more interaction and talking about creativity and things like that in the group itself. And that is where I will be giving lots of opportunities, first come opportunities to my membership site that will be launching soon. So get in there. Creative Warrior also has a website, creativewarrior.club. On creativewarrior.club, you can find my yoga schedule if you do want to register for one of my yoga classes every Tuesday night at 5:45 at Micah in Old Town. You can register there. You do not have to register. You can just show up, and we'll figure it out from there. But it's just an easy way to pay online if you want to register through the website. And on the website, you'll find updates about the site and the membership site and stuff when that comes out.
Okay.
I think that's everything. I don't even know.
Now, did you bring something to read?
Oh my gosh, I forgot about that. I did. Well, I mean, here. It's probably easier to find it just from the book than digging through my files. I actually didn't decide what I was going to read before. I was like leaving the house and I was like, oh no, he talked about reading something.
That's all right.
And we don't need to read. I'll pick one of my really short ones.
Okay.
That's the beauty of what I do. What do you, so we talked about how dark mine are. So should I do a dark one?
Yeah, why not? Let's end it on a dark note.
I mean, that still leaves a lot to choose from. Oh gosh. Okay. I just saw one. Where'd it go? Oh my gosh, where'd you go? I just saw the one I wanted. Right there it is. Okay. I will read this one. It always gets a good reaction when I read it at events and such. So this is just called Oil. At first, we thought the black oil liquid was oil. We thought we'd struck it rich and we're going to move out of the ramshackle farmhouse Jim's parents left us and live in a cottage on the beach and go to restaurants with valets or whatever those guys were called and just let the house rot and fall apart on itself. If only it had been oil. If it had been, things would be different now. If all the things we'd done that day had gone differently, I wouldn't be here, alone, surrounded by silence and stench and wishing for that crumbling farmhouse. If only we'd had a geologist or whoever it is that knows about oil come and check it before we invited Big Mike and his digger out to start drilling the hole. If only Big Mike had been busy or less willing to help a friend or had listened when his pregnant wife asked him to stay home with her. If only Mike had just dug the hole instead of leaning down on his haunches like a kid poking in an ant farm. If only any of us had paid attention in science class or actually gone to college, we'd have known right away that oil wasn't supposed to smell like that. When Big Mike had hollered, "Woo-wee, that's nastier than a sanitation station on a hot day," we would have run. We would have given up our pipe dream of a beach and coconuts and gone inside and called the sheriff and told him there was a giant pool of something rank bubbling up on our back 40 and somebody should come take a look. Maybe we could have gotten out of town before it spread. If Mike hadn't leaned down, the stuff wouldn't have splashed his face. He wouldn't have howled and fallen back, and we wouldn't have run to his side and noticed the violent rash already creeping down his neck. Jim wouldn't have been at his side when Mike tried one last attempt to push himself up and pushed himself right into Jim, who fell back and down, consumed by the black pool. If only the lab that employed half the town had told us about the chemical spill when it first happened instead of weeks after. If only they hadn't created something that could travel through soil, infect anything it touched, and kill within seconds. If only I wasn't the only one alive. If only I didn't smell the rank stench of that black death just outside the door of the closet I was cowering in. If only it had been oil. The end.
There you have it. Awesome.
There you have it.
Well, thank you, Allison, for doing this. It was a pleasure. It was awesome to get to sit down and talk to you.
It was awesome to be here, and I did forget all the things I said, and I still forgot something. I do have an event coming up on March 31st at Micah in Old Town. It is an event to wrap up Women's History Month with 5 awesome, fierce women creators, myself included. We'll be reading just just stories about our lives, about our histories. It is going to be at 7:00. You can find it on Facebook. It is called Daring and Sharing, a celebration of femme stories. Just to highlight, the stories that make the women in, your lives, our lives, who we are, and the stories that give us the lives we have today. So we have some awesome poets. We have, oh God, do I want to name everyone and risk forgetting someone? Myself, Isabella Mansfield, an amazing poet, Roxy Hayes Brown, an awesome storyteller, Christine Bricky, an awesome storyteller and writer, and Grace Karras, an awesome poet as well. So it will be an awesome night. Tickets are on sale now. You can find the event on Facebook, or if you find me on any of the sites that I mentioned, I am plugging it online and you'll be able to find it there as well.
Awesome. And all of that should be in the show notes. So
perfect.
All right, just go there, folks.
Yes, go there.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.